Hi there, IELTS candidates. This is Tony from succeedinielts.com, and in this video I'm going to talk about a student's answer to this question with reference to task response, TR. In the world today, it is private companies rather than governments who pay for and carry out scientific research. Do the advantages outweigh any disadvantages? Now, I think this is quite a difficult question. It is a difficult question type, and the topic is also quite difficult. So let's have a look at the answer. Today, it is more usual for research relating to science to be afforded and conducted by private enterprises than governments. I think I would change that into instead of by governments, and to be afforded is not correct. So what he's done is he's tried to paraphrase pay for by using afford, and afford is nearly always used with the modal can, could, can't, as in I can't afford it, and it's certainly not generally used in the passive voice. So I would just use paid for, science paid for and conducted by private companies. In my opinion, the benefits of this tendency are greater than its potential drawbacks. Tendency is okay. Trend, practice would be other good words. Admittedly, yeah, so by using this word, he is indicating that these are not his views, or in this case we're talking about disadvantages, and he's signaling that the advantages are greater, so this is great. There are certain disadvantages to this development, good, which relate to, very good, concerns over for financial health of those companies and the risk to purchasers. Yeah, I'm not sure about purchasers, but it's a good topic sentence in which he indicates the two supporting ideas, which is great. To begin with, companies usually possess limited funds. Okay, and their research projects therefore account for a considerable proportion of their budget or budgets. If these programs are poorly designed and managed, they could struggle financially and may end up in bankruptcy. Okay, well, I think that's a weak idea. Of course, everybody and every company has limited as opposed to infinite funds. But some companies have to do research in order to survive, in order to bring new product, particularly new drugs, pharmaceuticals to the market. Now, if they go bankrupt because they're making bad decisions, well, so what? It's the market. Some other company will take their place. Another problem of this tendency, I think we're overusing that, is that if their research bears fruit, excellent idiom, metaphor, and patented, they can use this to sell their products at an astronomical price. Well, of course, if they do that, nobody will buy it. And if this is the sort of practice of these companies, then who cares if they go out of business? Not only could this pose a serious issue to consumers, but governments, better with the but, may also be the victims when it comes to certain products, such as medical and technological ones. Well, it's not clear how the government will be victims. I'm not really happy with the word issue. So issue is generally used. I mean, it is used universally now as a synonym for problem. So I can't object to that. However, in this co-location, it's unnatural. I don't think you can pose a serious issue. You pose problems to consumers. Just going back to purchasers at the start of the paragraph, I think it's okay, particularly if we're talking about the government purchasing. However, I think it would be better to use the word consumer or customers, clients, but yeah, I think purchasers is okay. So what we've got here is basically an exaggeration. The suggestion is that all companies are going to sell their products for astronomical prices. Now, I know where he got this idea from, and if we have a look at this guy, who was a hedge fund manager who bought a patent and then jacked up the price by 5,000% or something, and as a result, as it says here, he became the most hated man in America. So clearly this is a one-off example of somebody being ridiculously greedy, and to suggest that this is common practice is what I would call overgeneralizing, and this is mentioned in the criteria. Band score 7, there may be a tendency to overgeneralize, so that's where we're going with this answer. Main body 2. On the other hand, this tendency brings more benefits to the public sector, finance, and the economy as well. I think I would just say to the public sector, or to the state budget would be another way of saying it, and to the economy as well. With regard to the former, very good. This, I would say it, as in this practice, this tendency would relieve the financial burden from the shoulder of governments, thus permitting them to allocate the resources which might otherwise be used for covering these research projects. Now, I think reallocate is better, because if you allocate, then you need to say what you are allocating it to, and it's kind of difficult in this sentence, which is already quite long. So reallocate is better. For example, the quality of healthcare service, healthcare is one word, the quality of healthcare and the education system. Education system is a compound noun. It is more usual than using the adjective. Maybe enhanced thanks to these sums of money, ensuring the social welfare of that country. Well, that's an exaggeration, isn't it? Because you're not going to ensure it, you're going to improve it slightly. Of course, the assumption is that the private sector is taking over all government research, which I don't think is a very likely eventuality, although it is suggested in the question. Private companies rather than governments who pay for and carry out. Back to the question. Another beneficial effect of this, you could just delete that, is that it would allow private sector enterprises to be at liberty to pursue their own research and make adjustments to cope with the market picture. Okay, good sentence. As a result, these tailored research projects may prove to be more suitable for the sustainable development of these companies. Some good buzzwords here. Enhancing their growth prospects, generating more employment for the labour force. I think that's one word. In the process, and making significant contributions to the economic picture in the long run. So that is a very good sentence. So this paragraph is a good paragraph. He's got a clear central topic, and he's outlined certain advantages to corporate research, or corporate research replacing state-run research. In conclusion, the unpleasant manner. I'm not sure about unpleasant. Greedy might be better. is very good, use their research and their possible financial peril. Demise are two principal drawbacks of the tendency that private companies are conducting more. Yeah, we need to fix this, don't we? Drawbacks to the tendency of private companies conducting more research than governments. However, this development, thanks to the potential large-scale benefits it brings about, is more advantageous in the long term. Yeah. So he's got a clear position throughout. The examiner might question whether he has justified his position, because all he's done is asserted it in the final paragraph. However, the fact that his arguments in main body 1 are particularly weak make it rather obvious that in this case the disadvantages, or rather the advantages, outweigh the disadvantages. So I gave him a 7 for task response, mostly because of the overgeneralized ideas in main body 1. Now notice that he's written far more about the advantages than disadvantages. We've got 119 versus 148. Well, in a discuss both views question, I wouldn't recommend that. I'd suggest that might be borderline. But in an in a question in which you're asked whether the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, I think it is fair enough to write more about the side that you agree with. If I were answering this question, among the disadvantages, I would be writing about fraud and undue influence. So let's say the research is taking place at a university and certain companies, probably pharmaceutical companies, are paying for it. Well, first of all, the people doing the research know what results are required. So there have been lots of examples of fraudulent scientific research conducted by pharmaceutical companies. Here's a good example. Merck to pay 950 million over Vioxx. So the Vioxx scandal was an example of fraudulent research by Merck's. Lots of people died, and they had to pay a fine which presumably they regard as the cost of doing business. Another problem would be that any university department would be strongly discouraged from presenting any research which was critical of products made by their major sponsors. So there is a clear conflict of interest. As for advantages, well, you could use the arguments presented here. You could also say that more research will be done. It's good for universities to be getting more money. Of course, they'll be getting more money from these companies, perhaps instead of the government. And the challenge in a question in which you have to decide whether the advantages outweigh the disadvantages is in presenting a coherent position. For example, if you've got a question about people living longer, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Well, the advantages relate to individuals and the disadvantages relate to the state, who has to pay for healthcare, pensions, etc. So to say that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages or vice versa makes no sense. My solution to that would be to say that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages for the individual, and the opposite is the case for the state. That would be my solution. In this case, I might say the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, provided that measures are taken to prevent fraud and dishonesty. That would be a good solution. So that's all I have to say about this question. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Please check out my website, links below, succeedingarts.com. I've got some interesting material as well as model answers for sale, and you can get more information about my marking surface and Skype lessons. So thank you very much for your attention.